This is your class, and this is, I guess, a series called What is Architecture? I thought I would self-introduce myself to you guys. I'm Paul Preissner. I'm going to show a bunch of slides of work, and I guess pontificate on the question. So I teach in this school. You will most likely have me at some point. I'll see you around. Is this 20 minutes? Is this 20 minutes? Is that like the format? What was the last one? I mean, like the presentation part. 20. Not just talk? All right, so you guys can talk during or something, but if you have questions during, I'm more than welcome to ask. You don't need to be so formal. I'm not wearing a good shirt for you guys, so I'm watching I think I thought maybe the best way to answer this question would just be to show you what I do. Obviously, I think that's architecture because I fancy myself an architect. I think the quick question is, I think architecture is a subset of buildings, so it's big and you have to be able to walk into it. I think anything else is not, and people who tell you it is are insecure. They want what they do to be something else. Everybody should be comfortable with looking. All right, so my work used to look kind of like this about 7-8 years ago. It was all weekly. These are just some projects. I mean, I think kind of when I first started, my interests were heavily indebted to software as a way to kind of find forms within architecture, to produce maybe new ways to kind of organize conventional programs and kind of occupy things and give different textures or figures in the city. Kind of odd structural things. Everything is kind of noodly. The office building in Kentucky never got built, but weird, noodly facades. Big tall buildings made of precast panels. And basically, I think for quite a long period of time, for me, that, because I'm 7 out of 39 years, that was kind of my interest. I thought it was kind of neat and still do. But I think what has started to happen in the work is I've tried to figure out ways that architecture isn't just a kind of sculpted practice of weird wiggly shapes, but starts to maybe be a bit more visually problematic by incorporating much more recognizable things, whether they're massive patterns or kind of strange normal uses of building material types or bold, kind of tacky colors. Anyway, so that's kind of where we're at now to where what I'm thinking is what is architecture. So this is, but I thought it was kind of a funny house just because it seemed really thin for such a spacious plot of land. But I guess what I've been mostly trying to figure out is a way for architecture to be less deadly serious about its own importance and to be more funny. So not funny in a kind of typical way, which is architecture usually finds its humor by doing dumb stuff like this, turning a building upside down. So very obvious jokes that I think you get immediately. You don't need to be really an expert in architecture to find this weird. This is not a normal house. And so it's a quick and easy joke. And I think what I found I have now over 300 pictures of upside down houses from all around the earth. This one I like because it's, and different types too, right? So this one's probably more expensive. This is like a really budget version. This is one where they didn't quite get the type right, but they they used a flat roof building, so it's tough to tell it's upside down, but the balconies are upside down. You see how they rotated the font too on the little, but otherwise, like, you would never be able to shop it. No. Sometimes they're theme parking, sometimes they're coffee shops in Japan. Sometimes they're big museums. I mean, they're always happy. Like, that's the kind of common thread for all of them. But they also have, this is in the Swiss Alps. It was really great. But they just keep going, you know. And like, so you have ladders or steps to get up to them, bikes, you know, just to make sure you get it that this house is upside down. There's bicycles and furniture fixed to the kind of sidewalk of these things. So it's a really common type thing, and it's basically the only way that I found people find a way to make jokes in architecture, and it's throwing, you know, sometimes then they apparently got bored, so they put a house on a building. I think this is also in Austria. I haven't been to all of them. A lot of them just in that research. Anyway, so that seemed to me maybe the most unfulfilling way to be kind of funny, or find a way for architecture to be more problematic and less serious. And so, and it also seems to be the only medium in discipline that can't figure out comedy very well. Like, it can figure out cynicism, but this is Garfield. Garfield's a cartoon strip by Jim Davis. It's not very funny at all, but Garfield doesn't like Mondays. He likes lasagna, and he's kind of mean to Odie, his dog. And the comic is mostly like this. Like, Odie's doing something, he's kind of a naive guy, and Garfield does something mean. I guess you laugh. Anyway, there's so there's decades of this stuff. And just as a funny side note, I saw an interview with Jim Davis, like a video interview, maybe 5 years ago. He's old, but they asked, like, he was drawing Garfield during the interview, and he doesn't look anything like this cat. Like, I think the last time he actually drew Garfield was in 1950 or something. So Garfield isn't even his name. But there's a few artists who have done some things that I think are actually quite funny. So one is this artist went through the 20 years of Garfield and removed him from all of the strips. So now you just get John, the kind of lonely single guy, doing all of the things he does in communication with Garfield, but now he's just by himself. So, you know, these things seem kind of fun. Like, whereas if Garfield was there, it wouldn't be quite as fun. And then the other one, which I think is more subtle but even better, is you put a real cat in the place of Garfield. So instead of talking back or doing things, like, he does what cats do. Just stare at you. So both of those are, I think, really good. And so I guess what I'm mostly trying to figure out now through work and with teaching option studios and things here is ways that architecture can be somewhat humorous, not narcissistic or important, and can be kind of more of a minor visual practice that's comfortable in oddity and clumsiness instead of spectacle and kind of spectacularism and stuff. So art seems to have found ways to do it. Comedy, only works through that way. Movies, pretty much every other medium has. And so we'll go through these quickly just to get to some other things. But I've been trying to figure out, like, artworks that do weird things or kind of funny things, or find quirks that are mostly ugly but somehow end up being a little bit interesting. And then this came along. This was like 3 years ago now. And there was this great, if you're Catholic, there's a great fresco by this artist, Luis Garcia Martinez, a 19th century painter. And then over the years, it turned into the middle picture, which is the deteriorated version, which makes sense. And there was this little old lady in the town named Cecilia Jimenez, and she loved this church. I think she was 92 years old, and asked the minister, the priest or whatever, if she could help fix it. And they said yes. So she went in and she fixed up it. And it looks like the paint on the right. And it infuriated like all of the deep believers in this small town, the Catholics were mad because they made a glorious image for a religion that's supposed to not worship icons. They wanted to put her in prison for anyway, somehow like both the effects and I think just the poorness of the painting in technical terms is actually to be much more interesting and kind of fun to look at. And so you can see that weird things from Russian video artists. Anyway, I think there's also like it always has to be sad. Somehow like if it doesn't have some regrettable aspect to what the product is, then it's never really going to be fun. It's always going to try and be self-important. So there's something like that. So what I've got now is a number of quick slides to just go through, and these are things that I've worked through with in undergraduate studios, and then also later in graduate studios. But the idea was to make a family of buildings of really embarrassingly bad projects, both in like technique and then also in, I guess, the audacity of believing that something like that should be taken seriously, right? Especially in its August company. So we did like melting buildings or buildings that are like pizza boxes or floor cuts or meeting things or stuffed socks, bad chipboard, foam, and cushions, pillow stacks. And all these are like supposed to be real projects. Right? So then we're kind of looking through the same things with the graduate research studio. The idea is to do something that actually figure out how through a very high resolution medium of software and rendering we could start to produce similar casual effects that you get through low resolution things like that, scene work. So I think one of the things we came up with is just presentation techniques of never actually caring about the project you're spending time on. So it's always the one that's kind of out of focus and no more centered than most of the other buildings in these little towns. And always kind of oddly colored or sticking out like it's trying to, the fat guy hiding behind a telephone pole or something like that. But I think like we were looking through bad colors or bad patterns or tacky folds or things that don't match and taking them a bit more earnestly to see if they might be kind of nice. I think they kind of are. It's just one thing 4 years ago. This one I think is great because it really looks, it's aware of how bad it looks, or she, or whatever. Kind of looking like weird home. So we did this. So I think this is kind of architecture. There's little people. And then I think like those kind of ideas start to then hopefully be worked out with more resolution in the kind of architectural projects that my office and myself are working on. So this is a school for an entire life cycle of kids from kindergarten all the way to graduating high school in different buildings. The idea is they all kind of look the same. They more or less have the same colors and they're soft colors, so they're not bold reds or things that let you know it's important. They're just kind of diluted pale colors. And then certain aspects of the volumes might actually just be out there like bad noses and things like that. So those are stairs. Those are kind of the enclosures of where the stairs are. But the idea is that like through both their kind of softening curves, this kind of sloppy arrangement, that you would actually get through the 4 schools, a kind of public plaza for all the students, but it wouldn't be so formalized as a kind of square. So it would kind of have one space that actually has, through compression, a few different possibilities of space too. And figuring out ways to like use different column thicknesses or bad leaning strategies as ways to make maybe every visible aspect a little bit more helpful, so we don't need to then do this through decoration, but we can just do it through combining floor choices and structuring. I think we're almost at 20 minutes, so I'll just kind of, you can kind of see the videos. This was a daycare facility for mentally disabled adults in Israel, and it was just a competition we did. And the idea was that you have a really sloppy arrangement of these functional units across the site, so everybody gets a kind of private courtyard and independence of their unit being kind of special place they could go to. So the whole thing didn't feel like an institutional facility, but they get to kind of go to their own little village or something every day. So hopefully it should have felt less. I don't know. I never found it fun. You always find it weird when you go to a hospital. So no one finds these kind of institutions as enjoyable destinations. So this way it looks uninstitutional. It just kind of looks a bit kind of confusing. So the same thing was applied at kind of an installation level to make these like oversized boxes. This was something for Queens. Here's a project for Russia as a site plan. A bunch of housing. And I think this was what we did this summer with Paul Anderson, who also teaches here. Although here he's only doing a seminar in the graduate school, and he'll do a studio. But we did a little installation for the Biennale of Americas in Denver, and we gave them $12,000. And the stipulation that we only had 5 hours to put the entire thing together on the site, and then it had to be removed 3 hours later, so it could be up from 4 p.m. to midnight and then be down by 3 a.m. So we ended up producing a kind of, and it had to be, it was for an event called Music for Animals. So there was an orchestra playing opera music for animals. This is all art programming stuff, so kind of weird. But so we made 2 barns. So the idea is that we were in Colorado, we were going to make these barns. So we made these 2 barns that we could afford, and then they were weirdly placed next to each other so that you never had clean elevations of either of them, and they would start to feel wider or fatter based on your perspective. And you would actually also, I think we ended up with 7 spaces just because of the weird like little nooks you could get between things. These are just some pictures of them in the day before. This is going back in time. So that's that. Now, what kind of questions? I think this is where we go, we'll spend like an hour, right? What's your name? Ricky. So, I know you don't have a question, but what do you think some of your colleagues do? Like, what do they want to ask? Yeah. What's your name? So what's Sydney's question? Why do I have the what? Why are they crooked?
Why not like a part?
I can't hear it, sorry.
Like, why not a part for children?
Yeah, I mean, I think, good question. So if they were apart, then they would be read as 2 individual pieces. So this way, it kind of makes more of a contiguous project that allows actual spaces to be made in between them. It's a little more compact. And then you get, I think what we wanted was a really nice picture that I think was pictures like this. So you get kind of it looks like a weird mirroring of the image, but they're all in very different perspectives. So it feels like something's inappropriate. Like in properly put together for your eyes. So that was most, like they needed to touch so that you could actually get images like, you know, and it was only up for a couple hours, but so that you have moments where you see much more of the inside of one than the other one. And it kind of, one will disappear, the other one will get flat, but you don't ever see them equally. They weren't that long, they were only 20 feet long, each of them, so the idea is like this allowed the depths of the two of them to feel different. So it was just, these were just mostly like to produce optical effects that made it seem a little bit more compelling than it was. There's just two precast barns with a kimono paint on the inside.
Did you just come up with the idea, or did you take your time?
Did we take our time?
Like, did you find it out?
Yeah, we spent
Or was it just like
a month and a half doing it.
So maybe that question could be, what kinds of drawings did you rehearse this with?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think with this one we made very few drawings. We made permit drawings for it. Most of it was done with much more simple 3D modeling. I guess those are drawings too. But I think we kind of knew the basic amount of material we could afford. That gave us two equal like barns, and then we just had three-dimensional models that we played around with until it seemed funny enough, but we didn't spend too much time on it.
what would you have changed?
What would I have changed? Nothing. I think it's great.
If you had more like budget, what would you have?
Yeah. I mean, I think if we had more budget, we would have had one would be wider. They're both the same width, so they're both the same height. Yeah, like they're identical. They're exactly the same. And I think given more money, we would have had them not that way. Yep.
Was it fun building?
Is it what?
Was it fun building them?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I just walked around and watched. So it was fun to watch them build it. Watch people older than me do heavy. But I just found out, so that this fellow with the ball cap, him and his wife, who's not in this picture, like they're the ones who put it together. They do like art installation work for artists in Denver. And they seemed like very happy, but I guess they were like, they complained to Paul, who we did this with nonstop the next 2 days. And they're mad that it took longer than they thought it would take. Although it took 10 hours, so it took as long as it should have taken. But so they didn't seem like they had fun. But they were like, this guy had fun. They were like student assistants from the University of Colorado, and they seemed to enjoy it. But the people doing it was, I enjoyed it. But that doesn't even matter. Like, as long as you don't die, like, it doesn't have to be fun. It just can't mean. Yep.
Earlier you said you're working on a project right now to try to make architecture funny.
Hmm?
Why?
Why am I doing it?
Yeah, why do you want architecture to be funny?
I don't think
How's your
it,
progress?
I don't think it is fun very often. I mean, I find that kind of boring. I mean, you know, for the most part, everybody who works on architecture is dissatisfied with the average of how it currently is. So anything someone's doing is because they get some enjoyment out of what they're trying to make it. So I think architecture is way too serious, like in terms of what its buildings are. They're very, and I think that's kind of dull and boring and rather predictable. So I guess I've tried to find ways that they can be more humorous. So, but that's not to mean like that you need to laugh when you see it, right? Like I think that's the joke problem, which the upside down building has, is people actually find that funny. That's not quite the same as when you saw the bear, he was depressed, or missing Garfield. So I got bored with architecture the way I was doing it, and so I started doing something a little different. Yep.
What are your thoughts on Frank Gehry's work?
Fantastic. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Yep. Frank Gehry. Really good work. But that's that's why I don't want it. Like, why would I want to do that? 77 years old now. He's 2 years older than my dad. So it's so weird that there's so many middle-aged architects just working on the aesthetic projects of septuagenarians or something. Like, you'd never see that in any other field. Like, young musicians happy to make Rolling Stones music. It's just really cool. So I don't know. I mean, like, I think it's all fantastic work, but it's their work. Right? So my disinterest in it isn't a criticism or slight of their efforts. It's just, I think those are their efforts. Someone was trying to pull my hand up. Yeah, it was you.
So the composition or orientation of some of the objects or work is a lot different than the standard. Where would you say that you draw a line, or is there a place that you draw a line where it goes too far from the ordinary, or?
I mean, I don't think, all of this is a weird moving target anyway, because 4 months from now, you're always a little dubious of projects you did in the past. So everything continually moves. So I'm not of the personality to set a line in the sand or something. It seems not helpful. It also seems to kind of ruin the spirit of the work, which is that you're a little more free, right? So once you start saying I'm only free, but then I can't do that, that starts to be a kind of uptight project, I think. For me, I think in general they can't be too bizarre. I don't know where that bizarre line lies, right? But at some point, if work gets visually complicated enough, it starts to feel a little bit too self-obsessed right now. Yep. Someone had a hand up. Yep.
So when you're developing your humorous architecture work, what do you do to try to get inspired? Do you watch TV cartoons? Do you look at Garfield?
I mean, I do look at Garfield because I read it as a kid every morning, so I'm really familiar with it. I never really found it very funny, but I've always read it. So I was really happy to see other artists doing that as well. There's a funny, I like comics. I don't necessarily like cartoons, but I think there's a guy named James Colchaka who's a comic artist. He was asked by Marvel Comics to do, they used to put out their annuals as a big story or something. So they asked him to put in a comic for their, and he drew, it's really worth finding. You might not have it. This is the kind of stuff we collect. Bears running. So, there's lots of art things that you do like that here. So he did the Hulk, right? And the Hulk's always kind of been a funny, I think Sarah saw this. You guys know comics that the Hulk at some point, and what I've always found kind of interesting is he's the only one who it's not fun to be. Like all the other superheroes, like, even though they love it and they're very proud of themselves for being able to be a spider or to do whatever they do. The Hulk, like, it really hurts him. And so he would always avoid being the Hulk. So it was kind of fun. But anyway, so he just drew a picture, like the Hulk walking through the rain the whole time. So he just keeps walking through it, and then he can smack, he's going to fight the rain, and then he falls down. So I thought that was kind of good. So I don't know. I mean, I like all of those things, but I like pictures on the internet, as you just saw. What it is. I don't know. I listen to music. You had a question?
Yeah. So in relation to the curvy and wobbly structures you showed in the beginning and the presence of like fun in architecture, do you think fun would be characterized by like curvier lines or like a kind of something unconventional, or like or would fun just be like the way you go about building it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not related to. I think I used to be much more a proponent of technique as it produces a certain type of geometry, right? So I think that's clear. And I think it's not necessary, right? Like I think if you're really interested in kind of the game of effects or something, or like the meanings or ways things can do, then you have to be more agnostic and promiscuous about the objects that compose those things. So that's why I like, I mean, that looks like fortune cookie pants and those are balloon shapes, but then you get things that are kind of chunky and square-like as well, but not lined up. Kind of weird cross bracing. So I don't think it has anything to do with geometry anymore. I mean, all of this has geometry, but it doesn't have to do with any specific type. But that's just me. Which Brian might think otherwise. He's a big block guy. And like Brand's a modernist, so. Other questions do you guys have? You're only a year and 8 weeks in. What? I'm only 8 weeks in. So you should have even more questions. You have a question. I mean, I think it's a really good idea to be able to just have a question if somebody puts you on the spot, because it makes you seem like your brain is always working. And then no one thinks that person got embarrassed. Like, like what a fearless intellect that person has. Like, ask a question to ask a question, and immediately like cut back.
So if you were back in high school, would you do architecture all over again?
I mean, I didn't go into architecture from high school, so I wanted to do photography. My parents thought that was a stupid way to spend university dollars. So I come from a family of very serious engineers. Mechanical engineers, aerospace engineers, chemical engineers. So they wanted engineering, but architecture seemed a way to like satisfy their seriousness. And I still hated it for 2 years and wanted to go into linguistics. I thought it was fun, learning how like languages migrate around. And then I just kind of liked it and stuck with it because I got really good at it. So if I went back to high school, I would do the same thing. which is not do what my parents wanted me to do. What do you think the sleeping guy wants to know? I don't blame you. What was your, like, what were your questions? That's kind of courageous. Do any of you want to know if you picked the right school? You did.
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, there's a very clear sort of divide system versus like where you're going and where you're going now. Was that an immediate thing? Did you just all of a sudden decide, all right, what I'm doing, I'm bored with it, I need to find something else?
Yeah, I mean, I did my graduate studies at Columbia University at the end of the 90s, which is where all, like, one of the places where all the kind of digital work was born, in a way. And it was kind of new and very exciting, and so I did it. It was really kind of neat. And then at some point, over 7 years of it, it doesn't seem to get better. Not that it's not good. I think there's a lot of good work, but it also seems kind of solved as an architectural problem. I mean, my parents don't find problems with Zaha Hadid's work or Frank Gehry's work. Like, for them, that's a viable architecture, and I think that feels weird, like, at some point. So it means they won, which is great, like, we won. But for me, I think, like, I'm more interested in trying to work on, like, figuring out new ways for architecture to be problematic. So at that point, like, all the kind of digital work now as a kind of like disciplinary issue seems pretty well settled, and people are mostly figuring out how to use the middle faster or use robot arms to put it together, and I think that's great, expensive, and conservative work that still needs to be done, but I just don't find it too interesting, right? Like when people's pocketbooks open so wide to do that work, like, it's not really very frightening anymore. Now and that makes me feel weird. So that's my own, like, psychological tick or something, that when something starts getting well accepted, I no longer want to be a part of it. But that was part of it. So I needed to find something that wasn't that. That wasn't just a problem of finesse and making it better or more efficient or more cost-effective or easier to construct. None of those issues ever really interested me about the surface problem, the kind of lobby problem, and curvature problem. Like, the constructability, I think, was important when no one knew how to even go about it. But once you figure it out, now it's just about being good at it, and that's an expertise issue, which I find good, but not for me. So that's how it kind of came about. So the boredom wasn't, I still like looking at it. I have peers who weirdly still put all of their energy into it, and I like seeing what they do. But for me, it just started to feel weird. Like, it all comes down to, like, your parents, right? So I think, I don't know, like, you would never want, if your mom likes your music, like, you know you're not listening to the right music. So I think that's kind of a good rule to just follow for your entire life.
All right, we have time for one more question. Joe, do you have questions?
Do you think that it takes understanding how to be good at that stuff in order to break that cycle, or is it just okay, just do whatever you want all the time?
I mean, I think if it did, it would mean you'd have to know, like, be fluent at doing everything that's been done before you could go on. I think if you want to do great renderings like I do, then it helps to know that kind of stuff. But if that's not important, then you don't need that stuff. I think there's conceptual issues and technical issues. The technical issues, I think, are very important for me. The conceptual ones were also important, but more arbitrary. Like it could have been anything